Welcome to the BudsnReality Show. I'm Sean Collins, the guy with a lot to say. And in the house, we have the man solely responsible for the runoff in Georgia at the last midterm, Mr. Chase Oliver. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. I look forward to talking with you about that and a lot of other things.
Oh, well, you got a lot going on, man. You've been quite busy as of recent. I've seen all your videos that you've been posting. You're definitely doing the Cop City thing, which we'll definitely get into that. But real quick to get started, let's get a quick bio on you. Let's tell us about yourself a little bit and what you're doing.
Yeah, so my name's Chase Oliver, and I am a candidate for president right now. What brought me to being a candidate for president, seeking the Libertarian nomination, is I started out being an anti-war activist in politics. And once I realized that the Democratic Party was not really an anti-war party at all, I went shopping for a new political party. That was back in 2008 when I left the Democrats. 2010, I found the Libertarian Party through a happenstance meeting at the Atlanta Pride Festival because they were the only political party there. And from then on, I've kind of grown within the Liberty movement to be a member of my state's executive committee, a local affiliate chair who did lots of direct and mutual aid work in that regards. And now I've been both a congressional, Senate, and now looking to be our party's presidential candidate. So I've put on a lot of hats over the years and kept myself busy in the Liberty movement. And I think I'm getting a good reception as I travel around and tell my story.
You're definitely getting a good reception. I'm giving you a good reception. I'll say something about you real quick. When I hear you talk, when I heard you talk during your debate, which there was 3 debates that the Libertarians really killed it on, and that was your debate, Shane Hazel's debate, and Michael White's debate. You guys did great. It was flawless. It was cool to see our people up there on a grand stage finally. And to get some get some heads turned, get some ideas put out there, and it was very cool. But recently you've been advocating for against the Cop City, and when I hear you speak, whether it be during your debate or whether you're talking about the Cop City, I don't necessarily hear a guy that's running for office. I hear a guy who's an advocate, and I love that.
Well, I've always been somebody who kind of speaks from the heart. I got my start in politics being an activist, kind of on the street, protesting, fighting. The war machine is essentially what really got me started. But since then, I've moved over into certainly fighting for things like fair and free immigration, justice reform issues that I feel like, liberty can be life and death at the most core level for a lot of these issues. And it really speaks to our values. And one of the things I've espoused as a candidate is the need for us to have an empathic message moving forward, because one of the things a presidential candidate is responsible for is being a brand awareness officer. Essentially, you're like the chief brand officer. You're the people who look to for what the brand stands for. And I believe we need to have a message that rings true with empathy and respect, because there's a misconception about us libertarians. A lot of people don't even know what we are, but those who even have heard of us, many times they think that we're selfish or that we're only in it for ourselves and it's just about us. But I believe that's actually completely wrong. The notion of liberty is actually an empathic message that says everybody can live their life as they see fit, so long as they're not harming people with force, fraud, coercion, or theft. I think that is a message that really can ring true to most people, that you can own your own life. And so that's why I try to focus on those issues that are, that speak to the empathy of liberty in a real big way. And I think that's what we need to be leading with in 2024, because the other 2 parties that are out there, they're just full of hatred towards one another, and they want to continue to fight one another. And I think we need to be the arbiters of peace in politics.
And I dig that, and I totally agree with you 100%. Now, that being said, what would be your message to, and I'm totally putting libertarians on blast right now because I feel like it needs to be done. How you say the other 2, they fight amongst each other and fight each other, and that's kind of their thing. Well, libertarians love to fight amongst themselves. And, that could very well be our undoing in 24 when we have a very special opportunity with them running Trump Biden 2.0 again, because nobody really wants this.
Absolutely. And I can say this as a libertarian, have I ever participated in any kind of infighting in the party? Yeah, sure. Family people have squabbles, but as a candidate, I have never tried to focus on infighting. I don't believe that that is what a candidate is supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be, especially as a presidential candidate, as a Senate candidate, my job was to represent, broadly speaking, all of the libertarians in Georgia, the entire liberty movement in Georgia. And so as a presidential candidate, I seek to do that across the 50 states plus DC, to represent all of the libertarians across the country in a broad way, to where we can get behind this candidacy and really take advantage of the chance that we have in 2024 to really break through the two-party static. And I do think with Trump Biden 2.0, one of the reasons why I'm running is because I very well contrast myself to them, because they're both basically around 80 years old and I'm half that age. And I'm looking to speak to a next generation of libertarians. And sometimes it's going to take a younger messenger to reach out to a younger audience. And I think we need to do that with Gen Z in particular, because they're a growing voting bloc. And in 10 years, they will be the largest voting bloc. So if we're not seeding that soil right now, we're never going to have crop to harvest. You know what I'm saying? So we need to go ahead and start speaking to those young people now, injecting the ideas of liberty now into that conversation. Because if we don't, we seed the field to the Republicans and Democrats. And I just don't think that that's a great strategy for our party. So I want to be a younger messenger. I think that's what we need. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Younger and fresh ideas is the great grand idea for a lot of us, is what we're looking for. Nobody wants to see these two dinosaurs go at it. It's kind of upsetting that the powers that be feel like they have to do that again. Even there's 330 some odd million folks here in the United States, and we have so many bright people who are very smart and probably have some great ideas, but we're like, hey, we're going to do Trump and Biden again. Let's just do it again because we have nobody else better. And I have a hard time believing that.
Yeah, well, it might be the best that the two parties can muster, I guess, the old dinosaur parties. And that's because they're stuck in this, it's really, frankly, a 19th century system of the way we have just two parties, the way we've stuck ourselves into a duopoly. And it's about time that we break down the duopoly. I believe that we should really be getting represented by not just three parties, 4, 5, 6 parties, because there's a large spectrum of political thought in this country. And when we have that, it forces coalition building. It forces us to get around single issues as opposed to just being partisan. Because if you have 3, 4, 5, 6 parties, they may agree with you on immigration issues or on lowering taxes or making it easier to start a small business. But you have to actually come around to those single issue coalitions, and it creates more civil government and ultimately a more responsive government. And that's, besides being a minimal sized government, I want it to be responsive and civil. Because everything we have right now is the exact opposite. It's too big, it's non-responsive to the people, and it's absolutely a partisan shit show, frankly. And so we need to have all three of those things reformed. And one of the great ways we do that is by breaking down duopoly. So I'm encouraging people, even if you're not, if I become the nominee, I'm going to be telling people, hey, even if you're not 100% libertarian today, you need to get out and vote libertarian to break down the duopoly. You need to send a message that we need to actually do this. Now, it doesn't mean I'm going to compromise on my values or what I believe in, but I'm sure each and every voter can find single issue coalitions they can build within the Libertarian Party that they can work towards. And if they want to send a message to the two-party system and move the Overton window in that direction, I'm the candidate they want to pick in 2024.
Okay, now I hear you bring up the Gen Z folks and how they're going to be, coming in droves and doing a lot of voting here pretty quick. What about the people? Because I believe in 2020, there's about 101 million people who did not vote at all. How do you expect to get to those people?
Well, that's going to be a biggest challenge, right? The easiest challenge for us is to get the libertarian base out. The next biggest challenge would be getting independent voters who are currently voting regularly. The way you get out the non-voter is you do have to present something that's starkly different than what the two-party system has always brought us. Again, it's one of the reasons why I want to focus more on the empathic and nature of liberty, because we have heard, we've heard the state sucks, the state sucks, the state sucks, like for 20 years. And that message resonates to a certain group of people. And we've gotten that base. We need to now grow that base. And we need to talk about what's liberty going to give you. what's in it for you, what's in it for your family, in a way that's going to actually resonate with people, especially people who don't vote because they feel apathetic. We need to present them with a reason why they need to get out and vote for the Libertarian candidate, why they need to send that message to the two-party system, and also be supporting those down ticket candidates who are actually in winnable races. I mean, not that the presidency is not winnable. There is absolutely a world where the Libertarian can win the presidency in 2024, and I will fight with every fiber of my being to make that happen. But there are also races that are quite easier to win at the local level and at the statewide level that we can support. There are candidates all over the country. I've already endorsed a few. It's Nathan Slusher, who's running for Brevard County Commission. There's other folks that I've started to endorse. Clinton Cowart is my most recent endorsement. He's running for Savannah alderman. These local races are the last line of defense against tyranny, because when you have people in local office, they can stop the state where it is. And when you have people in statewide office, they can stop the federal government at their border. And so we need to be supporting those winnable races. So I would tell the non-voter, get out, vote for the Libertarian candidate for president, send that message, but also find the other Liberty voters, the other Liberty candidates rather, in those local races and support them and help them win. And I'm going to be targeting and trying to find those races so that I can help support them with media and with any kind of attention that the presidential candidate can give them to help push them over the finish line to win. That's one of my goals of campaigning. And I think with that kind of difference in messaging style, with the ability to talk about bold way and growing our local races, that's how we win.
Yes, and I totally agree with you on that too. It's just being a libertarian, especially when you ran in the last midterm for Senate and the runoff went off, and that was actually really super cool. I'm not even gonna lie, that was awesome, because it showed Dumb and Dumber had to try to figure it out, how to pull these votes in, but there's a lot of shade thrown towards you and the Libertarian Party after that, especially, I don't know what you saw from your side, but from my side, a lot of people from the Republican Party were extremely upset. And they were like, oh, the pesky Libertarians did this and we would have had it otherwise. And I'm like, I don't think so. You should have ran better candidates. And when you tell them that, they don't really take that too well.
Well, here's the truth. I gave Herschel Walker every opportunity in that runoff to help earn the Libertarian votes. And to be fair, I gave Raphael Warnock that same chance too. As soon as the runoff happened, I sent both campaigns a notice that I wanted to have a forum that was offered to be televised, where they could speak to me and a member of the media in a forum and talk about libertarian values and what they can do to earn the Libertarian vote. And both ignored me. And so I'm going to say this, the runoffs are going to keep continuing until you guys listen to us. And that's just the truth, or until you give us ranked choice voting. That's the other thing. They folks got angry at me and said, oh my God, you cost us so much money to do this runoff. You libertarians should have to pay it. I reminded them that every time the Republican or Democratic Party has a primary runoff, which I don't participate in even, my taxpayer money goes towards that. So if anything, I've broken even with the costs of runoffs and whatnot. Or really, they probably owe us money if we want to really play that game. But the truth is that when we force that runoff, we force them to listen to us. And you're right, they got a little angry. But Republicans in particular need to understand this. In the exit polling, most people who voted for me classified themselves as independents. Republican and Democratic voters who voted for me broke about even. There were a few more Republicans who voted for me. But at the end of the day, Raphael Warnock was leading by a substantial margin on election day. And the Republican candidate, Herschel Walker, did nothing to retain that or regain that ground with the 80,000 plus voters that I earned. And so that's their fault. It's not my fault. And as far as runoffs happening or spoiling of elections, we are participants. We libertarian voters are not spoilers. We're participating in the process. And it's the process that the two-party system created. The plurality voting, that's the system that the duopoly has given us. And so when they accuse us of spoiling, what are we doing? We're spoiling the process you gave us. Improve the process and we'll never spoil it again. Give us ranked choice voting. Give us approval voting. Give us anything beyond duopoly and beyond the plurality voting. And we're never going to spoil an election, but we are going to continue to participate. And until you give us that better system, I guess we're going to spoil your fun. and we're going to cause runoffs, or we're going to cause spoilage for whatever candidate you put up there until you improve the voting system. And that's not our fault. That's your fault, the two-party system.
Absolutely. And the two-party system, I mean, you know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. Well, here we are, and, you know, coming up on 2024, and we've been doing this insanity for decades. I mean, since the beginning. There's never been a libertarian president. You know,
And
I mean,
yeah, and to be fair, in our own party, this is one of the reasons why I'm running as a younger candidate, because I think we've run candidates who are in their 60s and 70s for the last 20 years, and we have not broken through. We have not broken through to younger voters, in particular, by running messengers who are either former Republicans or folks who are generationally distant from the Gen Z voter. I'm a millennial. I'm somebody who can still remember what it's like to be struggling as they get out of high school, go into college, start their, their families, look to start their first home. It's also my generation that's been sent to war for the last 20 years. It's my generation that's had trouble buying their first home because of the real estate crisis and the real estate bubble. It's my generation that has seen the largest curtailing of civil rights, both in post 9/11 with the national security state, and from 2020 to 2022 with or 2023 with the emergency declaration for COVID. It's my generation that needs to start fighting to clean this stuff up, because it's the older generations that have put it upon us. And now we need to grow up really quickly and start seizing the power so that we can give it back to each and every sovereign individual. And that's why I'm running. I'm running to take power out of the hands of the government, which has frankly been run by boomers for my entire life, and give it back to these people who are now the engine of the economy, the millennials and Gen Z, who are going to be responsible for getting us out of this debt hole that's been created for us. So it's about time we start getting to work, because we're the ones who are going to be alive to see the fruits of our actions, and not the people who are currently in power.
I totally dig it, man. Now, you've been very busy advocating against Cop City. And from my understanding, Cop City is correct me if I'm wrong, a $90 million training facility that's going to be in Atlanta for cops and fire.
Yeah, so let's just kind of go through the history of this land. First off, it's a huge amount of green space in the city of Atlanta. Atlanta is known as the city among the trees because we have more tree canopy than any other major metro area in the country. And so we have this huge acreage in DeKalb County that was originally Muskogee Indian land, Muskogee Native American land. It was taken from them, turned into a slave plantation that was then turned into a labor camp, basically, where they would send prisoners to hard labor, including those fighting for civil rights in the era of Jim Crow. And then in 2017, the Atlanta City Council basically determined that since this land had been used to oppress the people around it so much, they were going to leave it as a perpetual green space. They said green space in perpetuity with the original intention of building a park there, which, you can argue local funding for parks, whatever, as a libertarian, but ultimately it was supposed to be made as a green space to be left mostly untouched. And post shooting of Rayshard Brooks in 2020, the Atlanta City Council all of a sudden had this need to appeal to the law enforcement vote. And so they acquiesced and said, oh, you can build this giant training facility here, and we're going to fund $30 million of it if you, the Atlanta Police Foundation, fund the other 2/3. Now, in perpetuity is supposed to mean forever. They've already gone back on that promise, right? And now they're building this giant facility, which is going to have a mock city block so they can learn how to militarize and take down block by block like we're insurgents in Iraq. They're treating us like we're militants on the field. They have, basically, there are these protests that have been going on. A lot of it is environmentalists because they don't want the green space to be taken down. This is a left-right coalition of people across the spectrum, right? There are people all the way from green voters, socialists, all the way over to libertarians and people who are just like, I don't want my tax money wasted. But they're building this giant facility. It's going to cost more than the $30 million they're saying it's going to. And that's because the Atlanta Police Foundation has not fundraised as much as they thought. And so what's going to happen is the facility is going to get half built. They're going to come back to the Atlanta City Council and be like, well, do you want a half built facility or an all the way built facility? I guess you need to give us another 20 or $30 million. That's how this is going to shake out. Trust me, if they go forward with this. Now, This past week, there was public comment as they were going to introduce the funding bill. Over 300 people came out to speak at public comment, the longest public comment in the history of the Atlanta City Council, over 7 hours of people talking. Not one of them were supporting Cop City. Every single one of them were against it. The idea, the slander is that this is just outside agitators who are fighting against this. No, I met lots of people who are from my neck of the woods inside Atlanta who are opposed to this. And June 5th is when they're going to have the vote. And there will be public comment again on June the 5th. And I'm encouraging all libertarians in and around the Atlanta area, get out there. June 5th at 11 a.m. is when you can sign up for public comment. If you can't stay or you don't want to speak, you're a little nervous to speak, you can cede time to other people. Give me your time. Give me your 2 minutes. If 15 of you show up, that gives me 30 minutes to talk about the libertarian position on law enforcement and on justice on a public forum that will be streamed to a lot of media. So if you want the libertarian voice to be, pushed outward and not just in an echo chamber, let's break out of our echo chamber. Let's talk to the general public. Join me in Atlanta, June the 5th at 11 a.m. Sign up and let's speak out against the militarization of our police. There's better ways to enforce laws than at the barrel of a gun the way they do it. And we need to be encouraging those alternatives and not encouraging the over-militarization of our police. And I don't care that there are leftists who agree with me. In fact, I'm happy there are people across the left-right spectrum who agree with me, in particular the people of the city of Atlanta. And we need to make sure that the people in the city council, if they vote to support this, know they are going to be challenged at the ballot box next election. I will vote for whomever challenges it and says we're going to stop the funding, we're going to roll it back if they push this forward. It's my single issue vote for the Atlanta city government. And it's going to be a lot of people's single issue vote for the Atlanta city government. And I'm going to hopefully have libertarian voices. I know a friend of mine, Jax Crowder, they have already expressed interest in maybe running. And I would support them 100%.
That's awesome. Now, you said something that kind of caught me during all that. Now, you said that they wanted to keep that land green because there was so much oppression that went behind it, but yet they're going to build this giant police facility.
Yep, they're going exactly the opposite of what they originally said. And so instead of leaving this green space for a community that has been routinely abused and oppressed by the state, they're now building a giant boot factory to put all those boots on her neck. And it's not just going to be, by the way, this isn't just going to be for Atlanta police. If you think it is, you're crazy. They're going to lease this facility out to train law enforcement all over the country, maybe even all over the world. You know, I would not be surprised if you see your local law enforcement going down to learn how to break down a city block, house by house in Cop City. So, you know, this is oppression that's not just going to be hurting my city of Atlanta. A lot of law enforcement departments are going to be traveling down to Georgia to learn how to crack down on their populations. And I'm going to be making the call when I get my time to speak that if we want our law enforcement to be held accountable, there are things that the city council can do. First off, they can rescind qualified immunity for their local law enforcement. We can rescind qualified immunity for the Atlanta Police Department. That can be done by the city of Atlanta. And if they want to challenge it in court, let's bring up the challenge in court. The other thing you can do is you can mandate body cams for all departments that work within the city of Atlanta. So that means if the Georgia State Patrol tries to come in, because that's what happened. There's a non-binary person was shot to death by the police who was protesting Cop City. Shot 57 times. The autopsy showed the cops claimed they had a gun. The autopsy showed there was no gunpowder residue. There was no gun in their hand. They were actually shot through the hand that was supposedly holding the gun. But there was no damage to the gun. So I don't know how that happens, right? And so it's just a sad thing to see. And so this violence being put upon us, it's not just going to be Atlanta. It's going to be a lot of other people. And we need to be holding them accountable. And that department, that the state patrol does not have body cams. They only have them on the dash of their car. And so when this guy was shot, oh, lo and behold, no camera, because it was shot by Georgia State Patrol. And so we need to be encouraging that any police that operate within Atlanta city limits have to be wearing body cams. And lastly, we need to be encouraging that the city of Atlanta police hold liability insurance policies for all of their officers so that anything that time they do wrong, it comes out of their pocket in the insurance policy, not out of the taxpayer's pocket for when they do wrong, because they are abusing the taxpayers. We shouldn't have to pay for their abuse. That's not liability policies. Also, it will price bad cops out of the marketplace. It's a marketplace feature that will kick bad cops out, because if they can't go from department to department if there's a long line of insurance claims following them. They're gonna be told, sorry, we can't have you. You're uninsurable. You can't stay in our department. This is why we need to be in doing this across the country, but we can start here in Atlanta.
And it's a great idea to do that, because, you know, I don't know if policing has necessarily gotten worse. I just think there's more cameras in the world. I mean, maybe it has gotten worse. You know, there's no way of telling. But I mean, I remember, you know, I'm in my 40s, and my first sight of police brutality was Rodney King. That's what I remember.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah, I'm a white kid from a small town. You know, we didn't see a lot of that shit, you know, where I was at. And, you know, you're raised to think these cops are glorious people, you know, and then you see the Rodney King happen, and then you start listening to, you know, some 90s hip hop along the way, and they're talking about police and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, you know, you get into the 2000s where there's cameras on everyone's phone, you know, everybody's taking videos of everything. And you're seeing more and more and more cases of cops either beating the living shit out of somebody, or they're just shooting them relentlessly. I mean, you're talking 50 bullets in somebody. You know, how many times you need to shoot someone?
Yeah, and the biggest thing about that is, and one of the things, and you're right, Rodney King was like the first big eye opener. It was like when videotape first started happening, and we're seeing it more and more. And you're right, we probably didn't see it when it happened back then, just because of the nature of the fact that we live in a 24-hour news cycle world now. But what we need to also remember is when we ask for more accountability for police, when we ask to end qualified immunity so they're held accountable, when we ask that they hold liability insurance, when we ask they hold cameras, these things actually create trust with the public. When you don't have that trust, it's actually more dangerous to be a police officer. And so not only do these justice reforms help the individual, that is actually, you know, to prevent people from being abused by police and bad policing, it also, when you have these measures of accountability, creates better community trust of the police. So you're more likely to actually run to the officer when you need help. You're more likely to report the domestic abuse as it's happening, when you know that your husband's not going to be shot dead by police when they arrive, right? When you know that there's a better trust between police and the community, there's better responsiveness to police, it's better law enforcement outcomes, and it's better safety for officers. It's better for them who are on the job. And so that's another reason why we need to be talking about real justice reform, because there's a broken trust between police and the community. There's a broken trust between government and community. And this is because they consistently do not listen to us. We just had 7 hours of people speaking out against Cop City. And as soon as we stopped talking, they went ahead and introduced the funding legislation and voted for it to introduce it anyway. And so what they're doing is showing that they do not care about us. It's giving further example, which is why we need more libertarians to show up on June 5th, because I get to make that case. The more time I get, the more time I get to make that case that these people are breaking our trust, and that those who are funded by the traditional party structures need to be rejected in favor of new people, regardless of their party affiliation. We need new people. And, city council is typically it's nominally a nonpartisan thing, but we need to have liberty voices on the Atlanta City Council and in city councils across the country. And so I encourage you, if you're a libertarian, the best thing you can do, and I know this is funny saying this on a podcast, is get off the internet, go to your local city council, go to your local government meetings, and speak out the liberty message outward. And this is what I tell every libertarian affiliate when they ask, what can we do to grow our affiliate? Rule number one, find somebody who is well-spoken in your affiliate, who's willing to go up there and look presentable and speak with a clear voice for liberty at those meetings. And if you can see them your time, do that. If not, just be there and be visible behind them. Stand behind them with, with signs if you can, any kind of t-shirts you can wear that unify you as a group, do that. Secondly, be the libertarian in the room. find those single issue coalitions and be willing to go to those meetings and stand shoulder to shoulder with Green Party people or socialists or Constitution people or even well-meaning Republicans and Democrats who are fighting for a particular issue. Be willing to be the libertarians in the room there. Don't shit all over them. Just, literally like find those areas of agreement and work with them. Show that you're willing to work. Because when you do that, you create trust with the voter that if you do get elected, you're actually going to do work and you're going to work hard. And then third and finally, do good in your community. Find a community service project to do. Clean up a park. I tell folks, if you got a lot of elderly folks in your community and you're your affiliate, offer to mow their lawns, shovel their snow, rake their leaves. Do whatever you can to help those who are vulnerable in your community, the disabled, those people who need help maintaining their property so that they can feel comfortable and safe in their community. Do those kinds of things. That's the kind of stuff that if we do that, we're going to create that community trust with the voters and actually start winning races across the country. And I'm willing to do any of those things. I've done all of those things. I'm going to continue to do all of those things as a presidential candidate.
Yeah,
libertarians do that too.
Yeah, you are, I think you're onto something right now with how you're running your campaign and going out there and advocating. You don't see a lot of politicians or, soon to be maybe politicians out there actually advocating. It's more like, I'm going to do this or I'll do that for you, when we all know they're full of shit. But like, you're actually going out there and advocating, which is something you don't see at all. Nothing I've ever seen in my life, and I'm in my 40s. I've never seen somebody who's running for office and going out and actually advocating. So I think that's very cool what you're doing.
Maybe it's because I grew up as an evangelical. I grew up in the evangelical tradition, and we're big on spreading the good news and kind of the gospel. And so maybe I'm out there spreading the good news about liberty, and I'm just kind of an evangelical libertarian, I suppose, out spreading the good word, right, about freedom and what it can bring for each and every person. And that's the kind of campaign I'm running. And again, I think that's the kind of contrast we need in 2024 to really break through the two-party static and show the voters that the libertarian message is something different, starkly different than the things that they have seen out of the two-party system the last 20 years.
Now let's move on to some policy stuff, because you are running, and I want to know some things that how you feel about certain things that are important to all of us right now, and not just the status quo bullshit that the red and the blue are talking about all the time. But hypothetically, you get in office, you win, you get the libertarian nod, you win. What is the first thing you want to get done? Like right off the rip, what are you going to do?
Oh, so the first thing that I will do, like the day if I'm elected president, is going to start pardoning people. I'm going to start immediately with the pardons. I'm not going to work through the pardon office to get it done. If you're, Biden promised to pardon nonviolent drug offenders, and he really hasn't followed through on that promise. So I'm going to start pardoning any federal nonviolent drug offender, not just cannabis offender either. If you're there for a nonviolent drug possession offense at the federal level, I'm pardoning you. I'm immediately going to issue a pardon to Edward Snowden and a pardon to Julian Assange. On day one, I will immediately pardon Ross Ulbricht on day one. You're going to see a lot of pardons coming through on day one, because that's something I can do with the stroke of a pen. I will also deschedule cannabis with the stroke of a pen on day one. It will happen. That way, we will no longer have the banking regulations that prevent cannabis businesses all over the country from having to operate in good faith and keep them from having to have storage units full of cash because they can't use U.S. banks because of that scheduled substance. We're going to immediately get rid of all of those things via executive order. And then I'm going to ask the Congress make it permanent with legislation. Any executive order that I sign, I'm going to immediately ask that the Congress submit me a bill so that I can make it into law, so that my next successor can't just undo it because they feel like being a drug warrior. Other things that I'm going to immediately start working for is a budget that is balanced. On day one, we're going to work towards a balanced budget so that we get inflation under control, stop printing dollars out of thin air. We're also going to start, I'm going to ask Congress to submit me a bill that allows us to audit the Fed so that the Congress can let the people know what a central reserve banking is doing. And over time, through that education, we will see an end to the Fed. I want a bill that's going to end the Department of Education and block grant all that money right back to the states so we can start supporting choice in education at the state and then ultimately the local and individual level. I want to end the war on drugs and advocate from the bully pulpit about harm reduction strategies. I want to make Narcan more available to the public more easily. I want to make birth control over the counter so that people can have more control over their own medical decisions and autonomy without having to go to the step of abortion, though I am pro-choice. I want to make it easier so that that doesn't have to become an option for people. I want to support immigration reform and immediately oppose the E-Verify and Restrict Act bills that we're seeing. I want to get to the table with Congress and make immigration easier, less expensive, and more simple. And last thing I want to talk about is the cultural ceasefire. If I am president, I will never, ever use the power of the presidency to push my life or my belief upon people who do not live or believe the same things as me. So long as they're living in peace, it is not my business. I will not fight the culture war as president. I believe that we should oppose war at every level as libertarians. We oppose actual war. We oppose drug wars. We oppose wars on supposed, oppose the war on free speech. We oppose the war on the Second Amendment, and we oppose culture wars because we are the true philosophy that allows us to be arbiters of peace. And so my policy is going to be rooted in that philosophy, that you're allowed to live your own life in peace. And I'm not going to stop you from doing that. And I'm going to insist that the government not step in your way. And that's my philosophy. And that's the philosophy of liberty. That is how I'm going to govern. So if you really want to know, really look at any piece of legislation and say, how are we going to get government out of that? That's what I'm going to be advocating for.
Love it. Love it. Now, you said you're going to, get cannabis, out there in the world and left alone. Now, what about psilocybin? Would you be willing to get psilocybin the same or treat that the same way you would treat cannabis?
Ultimately, I would look to decriminalize all drugs the way Portugal has. But I believe that psilocybin in particular has a great medical use in therapy, particularly for those who have suffered PTSD, post-traumatic stress, whether that be abuse, whether that be a near-death experience, whether that be the ravages of war and being a veteran and having to go through that stuff. Psilocybin has been shown in many studies to actually help with folks with those kind of therapies and mental health needs. So I would absolutely encourage that people get whatever their doctors prescribe. And I believe if we destigmatize drugs, you're going to see more doctors picking things like psilocybin and cannabis as opposed to opiates and antidepressants, right? And so I think if we give the marketplace those options, you're going to see those being used. Things like MDMA being used as well to treat mental health issues. These are things that actually can be used and applied, but we've stigmatized drugs, thanks to the Nancy Reagans of the world with the just say no stuff, that we don't actually look at the practically good applications. And then we don't look at the harm that criminalization has caused. We only look at we don't think about that as a society, and we really need to. Because if you look at what Portugal did, Portugal had horrible HIV rates due to IV drug use. They had the highest heroin use in all of Europe. And instead of cracking down and creating a police state, they decriminalized all drugs, destigmatized addiction and the need to get help from it. And more people, lo and behold, said, hey, I don't want to be addicted to heroin anymore. I want to go get help. And now that I don't feel like the need that I'm going to get arrested, if I just admit that to myself and admit that I have heroin on me, I can actually go do that. We can do that across the board, including with opiates, if we actually encourage people to seek out help with addiction, use harm reduction strategies, as opposed to the boot of the police, the barrel of a gun, and the bars of a jail to try to treat drug addiction.
Well, the craziest thing about that is especially with opiates and stuff like that, it's actually easier to get dope in prison than it is on the street. I unfortunately know some people who have been to the joint and they were like, yeah, man, we could just get dope whenever we felt like it. And I was like, whoa. So, obviously they're not learning their lesson while they're locked up because it's easier for them to get what they got in there than it was on the street.
Well, even if you're not getting it, right? What's happening when you arrest somebody who, say, is addicted to heroin, right? You arrest them, you put them in jail, they go through the horrible, horrible feeling of detox in jail, which is a huge trauma, right? Like detoxing in the most bench and you're getting 3 hots and a cot, right? Not exactly an optimal situation. So now you're traumatized there. So even if you clean up in prison, you get out of prison, you've just now got PTSD. What's the first thing an addict is going to go towards who's been untreated for addiction when they suffer that post-traumatic stress? They're going to immediately go to what makes them feel comfortable, go right back into the drugs, and then get right back in the cycle. And so this is the destructive cycle of the prison industrial complex that we need to be combating. One of the best folks out there is Drew from Shred the Stigma out in Oklahoma. He can talk to you all day long. He's the founder of the LP Sober Caucus. And he and other folks in the Sober Caucus can tell you all about the need for harm reduction strategies and to have avenues to end addiction as opposed to prison, which is sadly where far too many addicts end up, because addiction is a medical crisis. We need to treat it like that.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. Now let's move on to something else when it comes to policy, and that's going to be everybody's libertarian wise favorite, taxes. A lot of us believe taxation is theft, taxation is extortion, taxation slavery. We all have some sort of feeling about taxation if you're a libertarian or an anarchist. Now, realistically, we all know that if a libertarian becomes president, they're not just going to make taxes go away and abolish the IRS. That's not going to happen right away, especially when the Senate and the Congress is all Republicans and Democrats. Just let's be realistic here. So what would be your plan to make taxes better or get us on the way to abolishing taxes and or the IRS?
Gotcha. So let's talk about what we can do in the current world that we live in, the income tax world, right? What we can certainly do is remove all subsidies, carve-outs, and giveaways that have been bought and paid for through lobbyists and giant corporate donations that have been given to the Republicans and Democrats. Fight to remove all of those subsidies so that we can overall lower the rate, the income tax rate for everybody, lower the impact that it happens to be putting upon you. That is the first thing you can do in an income tax world, right? If you want to change the system of taxation to something that is more responsive and I think easier to see what's going on, you would switch to something like the fair tax, which is where I've been a long time supporter of changing it from an income tax that if we're going to have any level of taxation, it should be a tax on consumption, not on creating wealth or income, right? And so the income, the fair tax replaces the income tax, business taxes, property taxes, all of these things. The federal, federally it does. You can fiddle around locally with property taxes and whatnot, but it gets rid of all levels of taxation at the federal government and replaces it with one consumption tax that's paid at the end level user. And it's easy if you're like, hey, we live in a 25% world where the budget is balanced at 25%. You let me shave off some more government, we'll get that down to 23%, down to 20%, down to 15%, down to 10%. And it gives people goals of like, we can shave down the government at this many levels to get this much of the taxation off your back. So I think a consumption tax is far easier for the voter to understand. And it does have the added benefit of abolishing the IRS. There's no more complicated tax code. One of the biggest things about the IRS is the tax code is so complicated, they don't even know how to do it. If you call the IRS helpline with the exact same question, I saw a study where like 50% of the time they get a different answer. And so it's like, if every other time you're getting a different answer to the same question, how well do they really even know the tax code? It's so big and complicated that even the people who are supposed to be administering it don't understand it. And so a consumption tax is far easier, and you don't need all those IRS agents to enforce it. You would just have a simple tax collection from businesses who would then pay that along and pay that off to the government. And you would, pay that when you consume something every day. So that is a way to get rid of the IRS, simplify taxation, and make it a lower impact on all of us. Ultimately, I'm a minarchist. Ultimately, and this probably wouldn't happen in 4 years or even 8 years of a libertarian president, I want the state so small that we don't need to be taxing at all, that everything can be voluntarily funded through fees and user fees and things like that. That's a long way away from where we're at right now, but I can still advocate for that stuff while being a candidate who's like, here's how we transition our way there. Here's how we get to that roadmap. You don't get to, you don't look at a map and just see, well, X marks the spot. You have to find the path to get there. And that's the path, is ultimately eliminating the impact of taxation as much as possible on the average citizen.
Now, when you speak of consumption tax, and I know what you're talking about, but not everybody who listens might not understand. Now, when you talk about the fair tax or consumption tax, you're talking about there would be no income tax, no money off your check every week, but then go to buy whatever, like whether it be groceries or a car or a house, that's when you pay your tax.
Yeah, it's a sales tax essentially on any new goods. So if you buy a used car, The tax has already been paid on that. It's already been paid. It's paid at the initial time that that person purchased a new car, right? Now, of course, that cost is going to get built in when the used car gets bought. That's how things work. But it's any new good would be essentially taxed at that point of purchase. So you're not taxed on your labor. You can earn as much money as you want, save as much money as you want, and you're never taxed for that. You're only taxed when you take that money out and you consume. There's also a prebate that is built in that covers all of the taxation up to the point of poverty, basically essential items. You should not be taxed for your bare sustenance, right? That's immoral to ask that government take their piece from your bare sustenance living. So this is why the fair tax has that built into it. So every American, regardless of income level, has their barest needs met. And then, anything else, you're paying that tax when you consume. That would be how it would work, essentially. And it's much easier to administer, to collect, than the complicated income tax system, which on its own has billions and billions of dollars of just waste that happens because of mismanagement of the tax code.
Yeah, and it's just not fair the way they tax people, at all. Like I personally believe that taxation's slavery, and anybody who believes otherwise, that's fine. We could have that debate but at the end of the day, like, nobody is entitled to our labor at all whatsoever. I don't care if it's the president or a congressman or a cop or whoever. I'm not entitled to your money. You're not entitled to mine. But yet they steal from us and then pass it along to all their friends, and I think this is a way to get rid of it, essentially, of that bad part of passing the money around to, their bureaucrat buddies, or, overseas to Ukraine, or whatever the hell else they're spending money on, or taking our money and giving it away for. It's just, I think that's a great concept. And I think moving forward, we could go full bore with that, and it would turn into something very good.
Yeah, the added benefit is there's no hidden subsidies and giveaways that get stuck in the 9,000th page of legislation. It is a simple, everybody pays the same rate. And when everybody also pays the same rate, it encourages everybody also want that rate lowered. And so that encourages people to actually cut extraneous government and the fat. And there's a lot of fat to cut, right? And so it encourages people to start doing that. And the first thing they're going to start looking at is like, where's the biggest graft, waste, fraud, and abuse? And that is pointed right towards the Pentagon, right towards the entitlement programs, and right towards the bloated amount of spending that we throw around in this country. There is, in every single department, there is plenty to cut. And when we do that, we lower that rate. And that's what everybody wants to see, right? Is that rate to go down because they want to pay less.
Absolutely. And you bring up spending, so let's just move on to that. These clowns in DC won't stop printing money. And it's not just one side or the other. They're all doing it, and they won't stop. And now they're fighting over if they're going to raise the debt ceiling or not raise it, and if they're going to default or not. And Janet Yellen's chirping, and what's going to be your plan for this ridiculousness?
So yeah, if I were to be elected, the first thing I'm going to say on day one on my inauguration is don't expect me to sign any increase in the debt ceiling. You better start cutting government right now, because I'm not going to do it. There is a red line and I won't cross it. I've been elected. I will be here for 4 years. There's nothing that's going to stop me from not signing that. So, and if the Congress wants to override it, the Congress can override it, but they can have that on their hands. I will not put more debt onto the hands of the American public as president if I'm elected. I will advocate that we balance the budget immediately. That's going to require major reform to the entitlements and major reform to our military spending. Those are our two largest areas. We need to be allowing younger people to get out of the Social Security system as quickly as possible, so that way we can wind that system down and basically stop over time. We need to reform the way we handle Medicare, Medicaid, and start getting rid of those over time. It's gonna require a long transition. We did not get into this overnight. We can't pull the rug out from people immediately, but what we can do is start the transition and have more market forces lower the cost of healthcare and require and create more avenues for those with lower means to have access to that healthcare. But that's what we have to start working towards immediately. And if we can't get to that, I'm sorry, we're going to have to start selling some land and start selling some things and paying our debts that way, because we cannot continue to run up the debt on the American public. It's just, it's immoral, and it's going to affect not just my generation, it's going to affect Gen Z and even Gen Alpha, who's coming after them. That's really where the shit's going to hit the fan. And so we need to start taking a stand now. Is there going to be, and let me just tell this right now to the voters and to everybody, is there going to be some economic shock and a little bit of pain from that? Yes. But like Milton Friedman said, when you take the booze out of the hands of the drunk, he will go through a period of detox. But then ultimately, his body will begin to heal. The longer we wait, and we've waited quite long enough to get that bottle out of our hands, the longer the detox is going to be. So yes, is there going to be some pain? Yes, but my generation can handle that right now. We're still young enough to be able to recover. The longer we wait, the more we're screwed. And we cannot wait anymore. Ron Paul even warned 20, 30 years ago that we need to be handling this stuff, right? And so that's why we need to be at the national level. He was saying this. If we had heeded that advice back then, we'd be in a much better economic place today where we're at. If we want to have a strong economy in 20 years, we have to start acting now. Otherwise, we're screwed.
Amen to that. And it's funny you bring up Ron Paul, because, all of us, will say, hey, Ron Paul was right. You always see it. Ron Paul was right. We should have listened to him. Stop ignoring him. And there's one reason mostly why he was right about everything. And that's because he was an Austrian economist.
I think,
literally,
I'm sorry.
Austrians have literally called every single financial disaster in the last 70 some odd years or better. They've called every single one.
I mean, I think part of it is just logic. It's not even in regards to one school of the economics or another. There's lots of great libertarian schools of thought with economists, right? And all of them have pretty much predicted that overspending and the growth of government is a really bad thing. I just think we need to be able to speak that message in a way that is more palatable to the average person. The average person's not going to read a giant tome of economics. We have to put these ideas in what I call kitchen table economics. We have to be talking about what it means at the end of the day when you're trying to put food on the table, a roof over your head, clothes on your kids, right? Those are the issues that matter the most. And we have to be able to present the libertarian message in a way that makes sense to those voters. Because it's the economy stupid was like the saying that the Clinton campaign in 92 when they won in 1992. When they ran a lot on the economy and the fact that there had been a recession post-Reagan. It's the economy stupid is really what every presidential candidate needs to be talking about, because ultimately it's the economy that determines the success and the prosperity of each and every individual. And so we need to be talking about how to create a free and prosperous market-based economy that's going to provide the most prosperity for the most people across broadly the largest spectrum. And that's free markets. That is free trade. And that is stopping government encumbrance into the marketplace so long as there's no harm or abuse being done. Yeah, if you're dumping toxic waste into the groundwater, yeah, we have a right to say that that's illegal. You can't do that. That you're poisoning millions of people, right? That's the libertarian response to environmentalism, is you create response to destruction of property and things like water rights and groundwater. So ultimately, we want to have a government that's responsive to the people in a way that allows us to be free and in a way that allows us to be who we are. And that's the message you're not getting from the two-party system. You will never get that from the two-party system. You will only get that from voting to break down the duopoly. And in 2024, that's the libertarian candidate for president. So I don't care where you vote along, you need to be supporting the libertarian message if you want to break down the Democrats and Republicans. I will fight to be fair, transparent, and honest. Those are three things you'll never get from the two-party system. So even if we don't agree on everything, you're actually going to get a fair shake from me. You're going to hear honestly what I think, and you're going to see everything be as transparent as possible. And so I encourage independents to just dump the two-party system. Walk away when they give you Trump and Biden 2.0. You will have Chase Oliver for president to vote for in 2024. I'm manifesting them to win the nomination right now. You will have Chase Oliver for president to vote for in 2024. And that is something that is far greater than anything you're going to get from a Democrat like Biden or a Republican like Donald Trump.
Now, you speak of the free market and such. Now, we've never seen a free market and or free market capitalism here in America. We've never seen it. There's always been some sort of government meddling in our market. How are you going to change that? How are you going to get government out of the way finally and let the free market be free?
So when I ran for Senate, I said this was the most unsexy part of my campaign. I'm going to start going line by line through the tax and regulatory codes and removing anything that encumbers people's ability to start a business, maintain a business, sell their goods as free and openly as possible. And it's going to basically involve undoing a lot of the regulation that you see coming out of, say, the Department of Commerce, the Department of really all departments. Let's be honest. Trade happens in all of them, but the big main thing that we want to do is, as we're looking at any legislation that comes before a president who's a libertarian, the big question is going to be, how do we make trade freer and easier for people, as opposed to creating impediments to trade? And the other big thing about it is like, we don't need so much federal oversight over things. We have the ability now in the information age for us to be responsive and regulate ourselves. I used to work in restaurants, and I worked in the greenest restaurant in Georgia. Now, who determined that? It was not the government that determined who had the greenest restaurant in Georgia. It was a private enterprise that went around and interviewed people based on their practices. And in doing so, they figured out who was the cleanest and most energy efficient and most green restaurant, and they got to plaster that on their door. And the way this company made money is you bought membership into this group so they can continuously go and monitor what you're doing. And so whomever bought that, according to this organization, this is the greenest restaurant. You could have all kinds of organizations that are doing that across the board, that are creating quality control that don't involve government. This is one of the biggest things about getting the FDA out of the way, is because there are private mechanisms to be able to monitor the effectiveness, efficacy, and safety of drugs that don't involve the complicated FDA process that we have right now that makes it infinitely more expensive to get drugs in the market. This is the kind of marketplace practices that I want to put in place as president, that will allow people to be more free, more prosperous, and show that you do not need government to regulate every single marketplace behavior. Really, you don't need government to regulate nearly any marketplace behavior other than those that are done through force, fraud, coercion, or theft. Period.
I dig it. I dig that a lot. And I would love to see an actual free market because, I have a business, I have friends who have businesses, and if you're a business owner, the government is not your friend at all. They will put regulations on you. They will make you jump through hoops or whatever it may be. Like, there's certain, I'm a contractor, so there's certain laws and such about carrying equipment around, whether you be a trailer or your truck, and how you can have certain racks on your vehicles and stuff like that. It's crazy. Right now, the state of Michigan has just outlawed oil-based products. So for a painter like me, that's bad news. Or like a wood floor guy, we need oil-based products for certain projects. It's just what it is. But here they are. We can't have them now, except, hey, you can have shellac still, which that probably means nothing to somebody who doesn't paint. But like, shellack's way worse than oil. But hey, it's still legal on the shelves. But that's just one way that government meddles in the business world.
Yeah, I'll give you another great example. The right to repair legislation that is going on in rural states all across the country. The fact that you're not even allowed to repair your own farm equipment due to the regulatory nature. And basically, it's John Deere and other major manufacturers basically buying the ability to say that, oh, you can't even work on this stuff, or else it voids all kinds of things. That's a big one right there, is right to repair. There's a lot of areas where if we can just go ahead and get the government out of the regulation of the marketplace, you're going to see a more free and prosperous marketplace. Because really, what does government do? They just dip their hand in and they take a little bit out of it. And so if there's not that hand dipping in to take it out, there's all that extra productivity and money and wealth that will exist within the marketplace. And that's what I fight for.
Yeah, it's what needs to be done. There's too much, and it also keeps poor people down. Like, say somebody who's in a poor neighborhood wants to start up a business, but they don't have the capital for licensing and stuff like that. I mean, it's just a way to keep poor people in their place, per se. I don't mean that in a bad way, quote unquote, but that's their way of doing it. And it's actually disgusting. I live in Detroit, or right outside of Detroit. I see it all the time, and how they treat people. Even, the guy across the street from me built a deck. This is local government now. He built a deck on a weekend by himself. You know, it's his own house, his own property. And because he didn't pull a permit for that deck, he had to tear that deck down and rebuild it.
Yeah. It's just like a very visceral example, like a very visual example of government getting in the way of you living your life. You know, I want to fight for a world that's more free for people, broadly speaking. And I encourage people to get out and make a difference in their community in a way that doesn't involve the government. Find ways to improve freedom in your life. Separate yourselves from government. Fight for the ability to be autonomous in your life. And then it goes across a lot of things. I'm a big supporter of choice in education, and that includes homeschooling. Because I think if you want to have the ability to be able to raise your kids, educate your kids, and teach your kids the way you want to, you should have that freedom to do that. And as far as those who are poor, who are without means, we have to show them that liberty can provide prosperity, that liberty can provide a path forward that can give them hope, that there is a better world out there than what they're stuck in right now. And right now, too many people are stuck in a cycle of feeling there's nothing that they can do to improve themselves. They feel hopeless because they have just constantly been battered with two parties, constantly fighting one another, throwing mud at each other, not listening to the voters. And many of these people feel apathetic about their future. And we need to show them that there is a bright, prosperous future available to us if we just do the work and free the people. And that's something that I want to talk about. I want to be an aspirational candidate. We cannot be a candidate. We cannot be a party who feels like it's too late and that we've already given up. We have to be a party that says we can fix this, and we will fix this if we work hard and organize together and get it done. And that's the kind of message I'm going to be putting into the 2024 marketplace. And I hope that more and more voters get to choose it. More and more voters come to Liberty. We organize, we grow, and we move forward in a more free world. We can do that. We can move the Overton window towards liberty together and fight for people to have a better future, including those right now who feel like there's nothing going for them. We can make sure that there's a better future for those people. Absolutely.
Love it. Love it. Now, lastly, this is a big one for everyone. I think, you know, during these times, you know, a lot of us believe that, you know, the powers that be are going to end up getting us all killed at some point with their foreign policy, whether it be wars in the Ukraine with Russia, whether it be in the Middle East, whether it be, you know, them poking the bear with China right now. At this point, you know, a lot of us believe like we're going to see a nuclear fallout because of U.S. foreign policy. How are you going to fix this if you get elected?
Well, I'm going to immediately stop the U.S. military footprint around the world. I think one of the biggest mistakes that we've made post World War II is the fact that we felt the need to be a military might around the world and to lead the world. We really should have been encouraging more free and open trade and dialogue around the world. That's how we could have become the quote unquote leader of the free world. Right now, we're the leader of a militarized world. And I want to change that. I want us to actually be the leader of the free world. First and foremost, that involves us scaling back our military footprint around the world. I'm a big believer that we should not be going to war anywhere that we're not being directly attacked from. And you know, folks call me crazy and they call me a pacifist for that. Okay, whatever. The truth is in World War II, we didn't even get into World War II until we were directly attacked. There was a lot of stuff going on in Europe before we got there. Until it became in our direct interest, we did not get directly involved. I think that's the best foreign policy, is for us to, if we're not being directly attacked, for us not to directly respond in that way and to support peace. As far as, you know, nuclear weapons and war, particularly with China, I just want to tell a little story. I was down in Perry, Georgia recently for the Libertarian Party of Georgia convention, and I'm sitting out in front of the hotel with some friends who are having beers. We're hanging out, we're talking, and this older couple comes up and they're sitting at the table next to us. And so he mentions, oh, this guy's running for president. And they asked me to come over and talk to them. This guy's in his 80s. And he says, you know, the biggest thing that ever happened that was wrong in this country is that they sent thousands of men to go die in Vietnam to contain communism. Vietnam fell to the communists anyways, but it took over 55,000 dead in that war. He said, if you're running for president, I want you to make one promise to me, that you're not going to send our good men and women over to die in Taiwan to save it from China. And I said, I won't. Taiwan will have to defend itself. I will not send young men and women to go die in a war of containment, the way that we did in Vietnam. And when I made that promise to him, he said, if you get on my ballot, I'll vote for you because you've made me that promise. Because I don't want to see the same thing happen that happened to me. And, I think that is, it rings pretty damn true, right? I think he was in his 70s or 80s. He was an older dude. But anyway, I think that's kind of where I stand with foreign policy. I want to fight for peace in the world. And that involves us taking a step back. It involves us fighting for nuclear non-proliferation. We need to lower our nuclear arsenal if we're going to be encouraging others to do the same. We need to take our finger off the red button and encourage others to do the same. And that does involve some level of international cooperation. And we have to be the leader there to say that we brought these evil weapons into the world, and we're going to be leaders that are going to bring them out of the international arena and fight for if any nuclear future exists, it'll be a nuclear powered future, not a nuclear weaponized future.
I like that a lot because I'm a big fan of nuclear power. And I think that's the direction we should go as a nation when it comes to energy. But for some reason, they won't, it's scary to some folks, or, I don't know how to explain it, but I know that nuclear, number one, would be much more economical to the consumer. And number two, I think it'd be safer, to hear, oh my gosh, nuclear is safer than, batteries. Well, yeah, I think so, because it can be contained and you're not mining for it. And you're not having, children who are underage in caves digging for lithiums and cobalts and whatever else they need.
Just even up against coal, nuclear power is safer. More people die in coal mines and in coal accidents. And then the people who have respiratory effects of burning coal are far greater than anybody who's ever died in a nuclear accident or has suffered any ill effects due to the radiation that comes from a nuclear power plant. And so if we're just talking about like statistically up against carbon-based fuel, nuclear is far safer and far more efficient. And this is, and that's using nuclear power from 20, 30 years ago. The horizon for what we can do with nuclear power going forward is really astronomical. Like we're looking at the ability, the difference between fission and fusion now, and the ability to kind of move forward with next generation reactors that are much smaller in scale and and can output much more power with a lot less waste than we used to do, is encouraging, and we need to be encouraging that kind of stuff. And when we don't, and this is my biggest thing with folks who are like in the Green Party who are anti-nuclear, it's like, how else do you think we're going to power our future free from carbon? Like this is the solution. This is it's an amazing discovery that was made, the ability to power by splitting or fusing atoms, right? These are great leaps forward in human innovation that if we harness, we could actually have a more free and prosperous world, because ultimately the price of energy will drop and it will be easier for us to power our future. Nuclear power is a great thing. And so it's something that if I were president, I certainly would be advocating for more nuclear power plants, less nuclear missile silos.
Hell yeah, man. I dig that a lot, because we need some economic relief one way or another, whether it be from energy or, electricity, any of it. We need some economic relief right now because we're sitting in the middle of like pretty much the highest inflation this nation's ever seen, and we need things
about over 100 years. Yeah, or about 100 years.
It's the highest. It's been a long time
since the Depression.
Yes. And, we all know who to blame for that. And it's definitely not Russia or China or anybody else. That's our own government and the Federal Reserve. Thank you very much. But, Chase, thank you so much for your time, man. I don't want to keep you all night, but I definitely appreciate it. And good luck on your campaign. Is there anything you want to say before we boogie?
Yeah, I want to let folks know where they can reach me. So if you want to check out my website, it's votechaseoliver.com. But if you want to follow me on any socials, just follow me at ChaseForLiberty. Or I'm Chase Oliver Libertarian on Facebook, but everywhere else I'm Chase for Liberty. Check it out. Join the movement. Join the campaign. If you can, become a donor supporter so that I can help spread this message all over the country, not just to libertarians, but non-libertarians. But I encourage you to check out the website, join the movement, and get involved. And let's win this thing in 2024 for liberty. Again, votechaseoliver.com.
Love it, man. Thank you so much. And this show's been brought to you by the Infinite Zeal Syndicate. He's a great dude. Check him out on Twitter @_Infinite Zeal. He's just a liberty-minded dude trying to find some other liberty-minded folks. So, get at him, check him out. He's doing great things. He's got cool merch like this hat. And until next time, peace, love, and liberty, y'all.
Peace, love, and liberty.